Hey guys, it's Sam. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I am a comic artist who's working on a fantasy adventure manga, and this channel is basically my journey to making that thing. In this video, I'm going to be planning out my 2025 comic/art goals, and they're going to be very unrealistic. And there's a very good reason why that is, which I will hopefully explain at some point. But in order to plan these like ridiculous and crazy goals that I have in mind, the first thing I need to do is reflect back on what I did in 2024. I started my comic in April at the end of the month, somewhere around Earth Day. I wanted it to kind of fit with the theme of like nature and plants and such, so it wound up being on Earth Day in April. I was able to publish roughly 9 chapters last year, starting from April, which wound up being around over 200 pages. I don't know the exact number, but somewhere in the ballpark of 200 pages. I grew this channel by maybe doubled it. Maybe somewhere, as you can see, I'm not like super on point with my numbers, which is something I want to fix. But I basically almost doubled this channel, and somewhere around May, I created an official YouTube channel for my comic where I would post animatics and shorts and more lore-based videos for my comic. I grew that channel to somewhere in the ballpark of 500 plus subscribers in a really short amount of time, somewhere around like a month or two. So I made the top fantasy list on Global Comics several times. I got over 40,000 views on those 9 chapters on Global Comics in that time. And long story short, I feel like I accomplished a lot from April onwards in 2024, and I was really happy with that. But the first thing that I thought of when it came to like thinking about, well, what are my goals for 2025 is I need to kick this thing into overdrive. That was a test last year. That was me just feeling the waters of making comics and feeling the waters of building an audience. But this year we really need to get into gear. And so that's why I'm going to be setting some really crazy and really unrealistic goals. Now, you may ask yourself, don't you want to accomplish the goal? Like, why would you give yourself something crazy and impossible? Don't you want to be able to look back at the end of the year and say, hey, I did that? I do. But I also know that the way that I operate as a person is that if I set these really high goals and then I work, basically at my max, which is what I really love doing. Not everybody has to do that. Not everybody likes doing that. But I personally love, and I just breathe working really hard. If I operate at my max capacity and I get not exactly at that ridiculous goal, but somewhere nearby, then I feel like I did a good job. So that's why I would like to set these like seemingly impossible and crazy goals so I can see how far, or how close rather, that I've come to them at the end of the year. With that said, let's see what these goals are. Goal number 1, and arguably the most audacious goal on the list, is going to be to complete 25 chapters of my comic Ye Old Treehouse this year. And that is a lot. Let me give you a frame of reference that you can compare that to. So like I said, around April, I published Ye Old Treehouse at the end of April, and from April up until December, I was able to publish 9 chapters. I was publishing about once a month. There were a few months in there where I did 2 chapters in that one month, roughly, or like almost 2 chapters in that one month. But generally speaking, I was like, publishing monthly, which is great, and that's fantastic, and I'm really happy that I could do that. However, because I have one of those, one of those incredibly long and involved fantasy epics, if you will, there's so much story that I want to tell, and I want to get faster at publishing. So this is a big one for me. Now, how am I going to do this? How am I going to publish? How am I going to go from 9 chapters in one year to 25 in the next year? So in order for me to hit that 25, I would need to be roughly publishing twice a month, which would make me bi-weekly. Now, I basically almost got there with chapter 9 last year. I started getting into the flow and getting into the movement of publishing at that frequency, and I was doing pretty good. I was getting quite close to it. So one of the key things that I think is going to help me with this goal and make it a lot less impossible, something that I mentioned in my mistakes video, which is loosening up and letting myself be 100% and entirely okay with imperfection. Now, that does not mean that I'm going to be drawing very janky panels and like having janky art. What that means is I'm going to work smarter. I'm going to loosen up my strokes. I'm going to not focus so much on these somewhat in some ways insignificant details that readers perhaps won't even notice. I'm going to make sure that I'm paying special attention to the big main points of the artwork without sort of, losing my mind over the smallest thing. I tend to prefer my artwork when it's sketchy anyway, so I think this one, might be very doable. So for this goal, I will publish twice a month, starting in January. And it's going to be intense, but I think I can handle it. And I'm actually very excited to see whether or not I can be bi-weekly. And so I wouldn't say this one is impossible. I think it's very hard because I do everything by myself. I do all the artwork, all the writing, the storyboards, everything, including marketing. But I think I can do it. I think I can do it. What do you think? Is 25 chapters in 1 year, is that unrealistic for a manga or a comic? What do you think? Goal number 2 may not seem as crazy on its face, on its own, but when you consider that I'm doing all of these things simultaneously, it becomes a little bit more ridiculous. So goal number 2 is to grow the official Yield Treehouse channel to 3,000 subscribers. So like I mentioned earlier, I have somewhere in the ballpark of 500 subs on that channel. And basically the premise of this channel is it's where I give more lore. It's where I give some backstory. I draw animatics, cinematic things that are more for consumers and not for creators. It's where I can give a potential reader of Yield Treehouse some interest into the world without talking at them and explaining at them. What I found, and I'm not an expert in this by any means, but this is just what I found from looking and researching and, understanding. I feel like a lot of times us comic creators, webtoon and comic and manga, have the tendency to create almost for other creators, right on down to who we market to. And a lot of us tend to forget to talk to the audience, to talk to the potential readers. And one way that I found that has been very effective for me to do that is by making these sort of cinematic animatics. Now, what makes this impossible? Well, the fact that in order to do these cinematic animatics, I have to draw them. I have to draw frame by frame. I have to, think of the scenes. I have to find the audios. And that's just more time away from working on the manga. So this is something that I will have to bake in. Now, as far as the artistic quality of these, they're going to be basically one step above my storyboard level for the comic. I'm not going to labor over getting the artwork perfect. The idea and the importance in these is more or less the narrative and making sure that I can touch those points of emotional intrigue that a potential reader and consumer might be interested in. Now, another thing that kind of makes this one difficult or sort of impossible is the fact that, when you're doing these short form contents, I'll be doing a mixture of long form and short form. But particularly when you're doing the short form, it's very hard to get people to get off of short form and get onto, another platform to read your work. So that's going to be something I experiment to see how I can really sort of intrigue that potential reader to get off of the shorts and go on to Yield Treehouse and read it. I'll let you know when I figured that one out, but that is the plan. And I think this is a really important goal for next year because while last year I was planting the seeds for my comic, this year I'm going to be sowing them. I'm going to be growing the story, trying to grow the readership, trying to grow the base, trying to, garner an extended amount of interest, try to get some press if I can somewhere. And so it's going to be very pivotal for growing Yield. So that's goal number 2. Let's take a look at goal number 3. This one, similarly to goal number 2, on its own, it wouldn't be impossible, but stacked on top of everything else I'm doing. Yeah. So goal number 3 is to create a website where people can go and read Yield Treehouse, not on any other third-party platform. So let me kind of dissect this and also dissect my thinking in doing this. It's no mistake that having your work on a popular platform like Webtoon, Global Comics, Tapas, it's very important to get traffic in the beginning when you have no other sources of traffic. When you need to sort of have that organic advantage where a person is skimming through one of these platforms and they see your cover and they're interested and they click, that's very advantageous in the beginning. Now, the con to that and the caveat there is that you're on the shelf along with several other titles. It's not just your work. It's, it's like a bookshelf. It's kind of like Netflix. I hear a lot of people, I don't personally have Netflix, but I hear a lot of people say that, there's like a million things and you have no idea what to click to watch. These platforms are somewhat like that. You have to share that real estate with other comic creators. And, as much as it's been an absolute like godsend using Global Comics, in my opinion, it's absolutely the best platform for readers and creators. I realized that I need to have a space that's purely for my body of work. A space where you can not only read the comic, but if you want to know a little bit more about the characters, there's a section where you can read about them. There's artwork, there's merchandise, there's all this other stuff within the ecosystem of my comic. And, to sound a little selfish, I don't want to share that space with anyone else. I don't want to have, you read a chapter of the old Treehouse and then it says you might also like. No, we don't want to do that. I want to have a space where when you're in the world of my comic, you're in there and you're able to kind of navigate and see other things related to this world. So this goal of creating a website where you can read my work is very, very, very important to me. And it's actually the first goal that I'm going to try to accomplish. I'm giving myself, to be generous, the first quarter of 2025 for this one, just because, again, it's one of those things that I have to take time away from working on the comic to get done. However, it's, I think, going to pay off big time in the long run. I could, focus less on lists and rankings and focus more on driving traffic to that website. The reality is I am driving traffic and readers to my comic, but I need to do it in a smarter way. And I know that many folks will, click on whatever link they can read a comic they like at, and it doesn't necessarily matter where it's hosted, just as long as they know where to find what they like to read. And I think that's a really important part. I actually did a poll on the channel. If you saw it, I think you could still vote in it. So if you haven't voted and you want to go vote, I did a poll asking, where do you all read comics? And I was very surprised to know that of the people who voted, and granted, it's not a statistically significant sample pool, but it's big enough for me to kind of extrapolate some data points from. I was quite surprised to see that a fair number of people actually chose the other category, which in my mind, that's like, the website for the comic, or perhaps Tumblr, or, any of those places that I hadn't mentioned. And other was like, it got the most votes by a long shot. It wasn't really close. And Webtoon was next, and then Global Comics, and then Manga Plus creators. So to me, that was like sending an alarm bell off in my head that says, well, the folks who are on this channel that read Ye Old, they don't particularly use Global Comics anyway. So that's kind of where my thinking was with making this website to read my story. This one is going to be, I'm going to attempt to get this one done early in the year so I can get a small win and feel good about myself. And my final and bonus goal is to get a piece of fan art for Ye Old Treehouse. Now, this is such a dumb goal, and there's nothing impossible about this at all. But I would like to, basically, what I can extrapolate this goal to is I want to start building a community around my comic. I love the support from fellow creatives, and you really can't get anywhere without that foundational support from folks in your community that are doing the same thing. And I am so grateful for any and all support that I've gotten from some amazingly talented fellow comic creators out there. But the fact of the matter is, we all want people to read our stories. And so, part of that goal of building that community and that audience around my work is, getting people interested enough or invested enough in the story to want to create their own pieces of media with the characters. Now, the difficulty here is the fact that basically what I'm saying is I want to make an IP that people care about, and that takes time. And I'm no fool or stranger to the concept that this takes a lot of time. I'm very invested in it. But I do want to start having ways where I can measure, well, how much impact is my story actually having beyond just someone scrolling passively or just supporting because they're also making a comic themselves. And one way to tell is, fan art or organic conversation about your work. And that's very hard to do, but it's something that I'm going to watch very closely this year. The official channel that I mentioned earlier is one such way that I'm going to do that. I've already, on several of the animatics that I posted on that channel in the past, I've already gotten some very exceptional feedback. And kind of like I said, that goal is going to be to take that off of the shorts feed and out into the internet ethos, somewhere where people can actually, enjoy the story and get more into it and kind of like immerse more into it. So even though that's a little bit of a jokey one, I do think that one is really important. So it's something that I'm going to be watching pretty closely this year too. And that, my friends, those are all of my unrealistic goals for 2025. I'm going to come back to this video at the beginning of next year, and we're going to see how close I've gotten to these, and we're going to, I don't know, I don't want to say grade myself, but we're just going to see how close I've gotten to it, and it's going to be a really good way to measure how this year went for me. Of course, I want to know what your goals are, whether you're an illustrator, a comic artist, making a manga, whatever it might be, writing a novel. I'm curious what your goals are, and I encourage you to set some goals that you think you might not reach, and don't pressure yourself to actually reach them. Just set them there, and if you get close to it, then you can pat yourself on the back, and if you don't, you can say, well, that was a pretty high goal, so it's totally okay. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate the support and love from you all, and until next time, bye.